Welcome to the LawyerFair Daily Podcast. It's Andrew Weaver, CEO of LawyerFair.co.uk. Now, today's guest is someone who believes in the value of social impact, so much so that when I was reviewing his website earlier, I noticed that he provides data about his own personal impact, journeys by public transport and proportion of local supply chain purchases, etc. So I have to say this, Adrian, who is about to join us, very much walks the walk. Welcome, Adrian Ashton.
Thank you. Hello.
How are you?
Good, thank you. And thank you for picking up on that impact report that I do on myself.
Yeah.
It strikes me that over the years, probably about 15 years now, I've been supporting all different types of business, think about the impact they make environmentally, locally and such like. To that end, I've been involved in developing some of the national toolkits that exist for that. And about 11 years ago, it struck me that I wasn't doing it on myself, which seemed a bit hypocritical. So hence why it's there now. And to my knowledge, I'm still the only freelance consultant globally to do that.
Well, I think it's brilliant. I tell you what I find, I'm a bit of a cynic with some of these kind of self-promotional things. And anybody who kind of says I'm transparent and I'm full of integrity generally isn't.
If you look at some of the previous years of reports, and some of the numbers aren't that sexy in terms of, I'll always put it out there regardless of however it looks.
I think it's excellent. It really is. And I'm glad to see some serious improvements in some of those, some of the data.
Thank you.
Adrian, that's excellent. But listen, just generally, Adrian, for those who are listening, Adrian provides advice and training in particular, and this is where we're going to be talking about today, within social enterprise, the social enterprise sector. He also, I notice, shares with me and much of the nation, I suspect, a passion for cake. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. One of my preferred models of offering support to groups is around cake mentoring.
Cake mentoring. Well, yes. There are lots of. Well, we could have a whole podcast on cake. I'm going to actually start with one leading question then, which I haven't prepared for you, so this may catch you out slightly.
Okay. How it goes.
What is your favourite cake?
My favourite cake. I think it depends on the context.
Interesting.
So there are certain times that a Victoria sponge is just perfect, because I don't know, you're in the Savoy, you're with the head of a kind of a regional membership body or national membership body. There are other times when you just kind of want, chocolate fudge cake with double extra whipped cream because you've had a really bad day with a client. And so it goes. So I think it's all about where you are and when you are.
That is a brilliant answer. I have to say, I thought you'd stumble a little bit on that, but you've delivered brilliantly. And clearly, you've also managed to divert yourself away from naming one particular cake, for want of offending other potential contenders, I suspect.
Absolutely, yeah. I like to think of myself as an equal opportunities cake eater, and to that end, on my LinkedIn profile, one of the skills that people can endorse me for is cake eating.
I may well do that as we continue with our conversation, because you clearly are an expert in that field. So listen, let's move away from these sugary delights, Adrian. And the question that I'm going to put to you, which we briefly kind of fleshed out before this chat, was the issue of, can social enterprise ever supersede private enterprise as a primary engine for global growth? I know there's a hot debate going on about it, but give us a bit of your insight and views on that subject.
Okay, sure. So, firstly, just briefly, just to help with nailing some kind of working definition to social enterprise, because depending who you speak with, there's people that understand it to mean different things. Some research that I did a few years ago with some clients, and actually looking through different research bodies, academic journals, national sector bodies, I won't bore you with all the stuff, but generally speaking, a social enterprise is identified through having three particular characteristics, which are embedded in its legal form, whichever that is. So it trades to create social good. That's number one. Number two is that there is a limit on how it uses its profits. So the majority of its profits, 51% or more, will always have to be reinvested into that purpose. And the third thing is that there is an asset lock. So all the stuff, the good stuff it comes to own and acquire over its life to achieve that good thing, be they helicopters, intellectual property, money in the bank, should the business be wound up, get given back as goodwill to that community to keep doing that good stuff. Now, on that basis, we can have charities as social enterprise. There are PLCs who are social enterprises as well by that. So one of the challenges, though, and over the years, they have come to actually be quite a big force within different marketplaces and industries. Now, historically, social enterprises have emerged in response to local needs, local issues, in local areas. So they've been very much a localized response to a local economic issue. And that's fine, that's brilliant, because it gets on, it fixes a local issue, be that access to food, be that access to employment, or something similar. But then it kind of plateaus and it stalls because as a business model, it's been created in a very specific set of circumstances, and it's hard to scale that when you've started off from the starting point of we're going to fix this local thing rather than we're going to change a whole industry and marketplace. So as a result, social enterprise can go a long way in inspiring, in challenging accepted norms about how business can be done at local levels. But again, the research shows, published research over the years shows that the vast majority of social enterprises struggle to scale, struggle to kind of hit that breakthrough level. But that's maybe where private business comes in, because we have global private businesses. We think about people like McDonald's, Coca-Cola, the Nestle Group, to an extent, the new Alphabet holding company over Google. And we kind of say, well, look, those are privately owned businesses, they're private enterprise. But actually, they're starting to realize through their infrastructures, through their supply chains, they can have a massive transformative impact on global issues at local levels, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. And I have an idea that maybe part of that, although it's a contributory effect because it's a messy world of how we're influenced and where our ideas come from. But a lot of their thinking must surely have been inspired by what social enterprises have been doing, which is over the last couple of decades in terms of policy land. But if we look back historically in terms of the evolution of social enterprise out of the cooperative movement over the last couple of millennia, there are business models there which, we look at how they've worked and we see private businesses adopting them now to create that scale and that impact on a global level. So I think there's more to be said about social enterprise being a transformative business model where it influences and inspires and works in collaboration. I think it will always struggle to be that truly transformative potential if it tries to do it by itself.
Well, I think. It's all of that is fascinating. A couple of things I was interested in picking up on was, I think that private enterprise has come closer to social enterprise, has it not? In terms of companies now, those that want to be successful and are successful generally have to be more mission-led, have to have more of a purpose, have to have more of a social, face to them in terms of what might traditionally have been viewed as a social enterprise model.
And there's a number of factors that have contributed to that. If we look at it over the last kind of period, because employment-wise, we now start to see that although, so many of us are still scrabbling around to find secure, sustainable employment, but those the big private businesses that are looking to grow, to expand, to recruit people with the right skills, university graduates and others are saying, I want to be proud of the company I work for. I don't want them to be dumping on the little guy. And as a result, companies, in terms of employee engagement and recruitment, are having to get more upfront, more decent, more honest and honourable. As a society, as consumers, we're more aware about ethical issues and awareness. We see campaigns like local food, buy local, fair trade mark and such like. So again, there's a lot of consumer driver on that. And then we're also seeing legislative changes in terms of how capital flows into private businesses and how private businesses can grow through schemes like social enterprise tax relief and the social enterprise investment scheme, which is making companies say, hang on a minute, there's a way here that we can help to open up new capital markets to help our growth by being more honest and more unfairer to everyone, rather than just always trying to squeeze the most out of every penny for our own personal gain.
Absolutely. Do you think within the social enterprise sector, Adrian, that there is sometimes too much expectation of what social enterprise can do? Is there? I know that the amount of interaction between social enterprises and the private sector is increasing, isn't it? But is there too much expectation of what can ultimately be achieved with it?
I think it's a fine balance. I think, as a parent myself with two youngest children, if I don't push my kids, they're never going to achieve their potential. Okay, and it's a fine line between becoming a pushy dad and letting them just slack off and just basically have very boring lives because they never went out and never pushed themselves to see what they really could achieve. It's the same with sort of social enterprise or any sector that says unless we're kind of encouraging it, poking it with a stick and going, why don't you try this? Why can't you do that? To help and to offer that support. So a lot of stuff I do with social enterprises of all manners of flavours and shapes and sizes is about helping them to explore that potential and say, what would it mean if you grew? What would it mean if you moved into those new marketplaces? And how would you get there? And would that be okay? And if it's not okay, then fine. But you've explored it and you understand why it's not. But without that kind of excitement to kind of whip people up to stimulate stuff, it's going to just things will stagnate, and so we need that kind of that spurring on. But saying that, I think the social enterprise sector generally has had a disservice done to it by previous governments, perhaps. So there was a policy document that came out in 2001 by previous government called Social Enterprise: A Strategy for Success, which effectively said social enterprises are all cool, groovy, funky things that are going to save the world if we give them the chance to. And nothing else matters. It's like, well, actually, we need a bit of a more nuanced approach here. It's good for some stuff, but not everything. And as a result, successive governments really whipped it up and kept saying, oh, social enterprises will be great. We need to do this, we need to do that. And it just hasn't happened. So as a result, there is that sense of, everyone now saying, well, hang on a minute. For a decade, we've been hearing how social enterprises are going to save the world. And we now see private companies stepping up to the mark. So what's gone wrong? Have they failed? Did they miss the boat? I was like, no, is that getting that balance right between pushing people to achieve their potential and actually being realistic about it's not right for everyone at any given time?
Yeah, I mean, I think is there also still an issue with perhaps the private sector being a bit sniffy about social enterprise sector? Or I always think not-for-profit is a real misnomer because it's not a not-for-profit organisation. They make profit. They just reinvest it and they have to use
because
it.
Because if you describe yourself as any group I meet who says, oh yes, we're a not-for-profit, my first question is always, how do you sustain your losses then? Because if you're not-for-profit, you must be for loss.
That's right.
Okay? And that's a philanthropic model. That's a charity model. That's fine. Okay, be a charity. Be proud of that. Don't dress it up as something you're not to confuse the rest of us. And a part of that, though, in terms of social enterprise, is coming at the world to say, we see a social problem that we have a business or an economic solution to. Private businesses coming to the world saying, we see an opportunity to make some money. Now, there's overlap between the two, obviously, but those starting points are very different in terms of the motivations, the languages that are used. And so very often you need an interpreter between social enterprise and private business to help them realize we're both trying to do the same thing. Yeah. It's just that we're trying to get slightly different, we're trying to take out slightly different things at the end of it. And it's trying to work out how far we can trade off and how much I'm happy to trade off for you so you can trade off for me.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. Where do you see the big changes coming? Very briefly, Adrian, where do you see the big changes coming in social enterprise? What do you think will be the landscape for the next 5 or 10 years?
I think it's probably going to be more an increased polarization. So something that I've been kind of keeping an eye on through various kind of research reports and mapping and studies and such like, is that social enterprises are starting to kind of diverge. So there's more and more out there, but proportionately speaking, they're getting smaller, while a few are kind of rising to the top, getting like the super social enterprises, which is a similar model for charities, which is most charities are very small, with a few that have risen to the top as the big super charities, which is the same for private business. 98 point something percent of all private businesses in the UK have no employees. So the majority are very small, but they still collectively pack a massive punch. I think social enterprises are going to start seeing more of that sort of polarization emerging, and hopefully the debate saying, and that understanding about saying how do we engage with the sector at different levels and appropriately in the way that we've got used to doing with private business, SMEs, large companies, micro business. How do we do that against the social enterprise sector? So that's the kind of I see the trend based on data and the opportunity and the challenge.
Well, listen, that's a great way to conclude this, Adrian. Thank you so much. There was so much in there and so much information. It's fascinating.
Everyone can go back and kind of rewind rewind it and listen again.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm going to direct people. You've got lots of different social media channels yourself, haven't you? I'm going to direct people. I hope this is right. To about.me/Adrian Ashton. Is that the best place to go to find more information?
That's the one, because if people like Twitter, people like LinkedIn, YouTube, Vimeo, SlideShare, Scribd, whatever you're into, however you want it, hopefully there's something on there that'll take you off in a way that tickles your fancy.
Brilliant. Well, if there's more you want to find out about social enterprises and the whole social enterprise sector, and more you want to find out about Adrian and his passion for cakes, then I suspect that's the best.
Beer as well, cake and beer.
Cake and beer, all right.
Yeah.
At the same time, I'm not sure, is that a good mix?
Well, no, I tend to do cake mentoring during kind of the morning, and then beer mentoring from lunchtime onwards.
You segmented it. Oh, lunchtime onwards, crikey.
Yeah. It's culturally frowned on if you do beer mentoring in the morning, I've discovered.
This is what goes on, everybody, in Todmorden, let me tell you. It's a strange northern outpost. Adrian, thanks so much. Good of you to join us. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
For your time. Cheerio. That was the LawyerFair Daily Podcast. Fascinating stuff there. We'll be back with more tomorrow. Thanks for listening.